this one lesson number 6. So at the top of the page, put down lesson number 6, English foothold. And remember, we're turning in our first 10 lessons, and we're going to turn those in during the 5th week. So that's in a couple weeks. We're going to turn all of our notes in. So if you don't have all the notes, lessons 1 through 10, you're going to want to write them down. And you find them right there on the website. And people have said, well, Mr. Cap, I was absent. I didn't. It's your responsibility to get the notes. So I have them all online for you, so you can get them and do that. Okay, so let's take a look at this particular lesson. I'm calling this one here English footstool. So can I ask you a question? What does the word English mean? Well, okay, England. And then what's a foothold? That's exactly right. If you're climbing the wall and you got a handhold, but now you're trying to get a foothold, it's a step to achievement. All right. And here's a couple of dates that you're going to need to know. And these are really good pop quiz questions on Friday that you're going to see. 1607 was the founding of Jamestown. Okay, and then 1620 was when the Pilgrims come over. And we talk about the founding of Jamestown and the Pilgrims come over because this is where our English heritage comes from. This is why we speak into English in America today, is because these folks came over. I actually have a little video about Queen Elizabeth. Let's take a look at this particular video.
Perhaps a woman can do better. Let's take a look at Queen Elizabeth I, the most powerful female monarch in history.
Elizabeth was the daughter of Henry VIII. Henry VIII was married to Catherine of Aragon, who was the sister of the Spanish king, Spanish Armada. That's what it was. The king sent the Spanish Armada because he was ticked that Henry VIII dies, leaving no male heir. And so now we've got a couple of sisters that are going to be in the vie for being queen. One of them is Mary. She was the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. She went back to Spain with her mama and became Catholic. She comes back to England to rule because she's the next in line. And when she rules, she turns England back into Catholicism. Causes a great big uproar. I mean, a big stink in there. And so then Mary dies. And then here comes Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is the next queen of England. And that's where we get Elizabeth from. So she's the Queen of England. And of course, people consider her the most powerful female monarch. Let's find out why.
Born in 1533, Elizabeth I of England had a rather inauspicious childhood. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, was beheaded on the orders of the notorious, larger-than-life Henry VIII, Elizabeth's father.
Now, did I ever show you that video? Oh, that's a great video. Oh, yeah, you guys need to see that one. That one you guys need to see here. Hey, hold on. You guys will... Here, she's about to go to her death. I'm going to fast forward just a little bit.
Masters, I here humbly submit to the law.
She married Henry VIII, and she couldn't produce a male heir. So Henry VIII wanted a male heir, and so he decides, I'll just drum up some charges that she actually slept around with one of the people in my court. And so that wasn't true, of course. And so now, because of the adultery part, she's going to get her head cut off. And there's the king right there. Oh, there is no way we're going to see this part. There no way. You're going to watch someone's head topple into a basket. There is no way we are watching this one.
And had committed the most unspeakable of acts, failing to produce a male heir. Seems Henry believed a woman could never rule the kingdom effectively. He was wrong. In 1558, Elizabeth became queen following the deaths of her brother Edward and her sister Mary. Elizabeth's enormous popularity among her subjects led to great achievement and prosperity in England, a string of accomplishments significant for any leader, male or female. The first English settlers went to the New World in 1585, opening the way for a great colonial empire. But in order to be a world leader, Elizabeth first had to prove her military mettle. In 1588, Spain's feared Armada was sent to England to overthrow the Queen and re-establish Roman Catholicism. The fiercely fought battle lasted 9 days, but on August 8th, 1588, at the Battle of Gravelines, the English fleet bested the strongest nation in the world. The defeat of the Armada established England's dominance of the high seas and forever marked Elizabeth as the most powerful woman monarch in history.
With the power of the throne, Elizabeth made war just like the men.
Let's talk about some of our first English explorers. And our first English explorer that we want to talk about is a guy by the name of John Cabot. In 1508, John Cabot was the first modern European explorer to set foot on the mainland of North America, and he did so right up there in Newfoundland. You know, Maine, Newfoundland, in this area right here. And he was English. Again, any time that a European country sent explorers to the New World, wherever they put their foot, wherever they planted the flag, they claimed that territory for the mama country. Okay, so here comes this English explorer. And he doesn't go south where the Spaniards are because he knows that their ships will get destroyed. So he goes up there in North Atlantic. They're looking for this northern route to get to Asia. They think that this is just a water. They don't realize that North America is too big a landmass. They don't know. They don't have the maps. Look at the date, 1508. So he was the first modern European explorer to set foot on the mainland of North America. Here's the next guy that went traveling that we talk about. His name was Sir Francis Drake. I want to show you this because he actually was the pirate. He was the pirate, Sir Francis Drake, and he set sail from America, made several voyages, but he set sail and actually made it around the world. He was the first English explorer to sail around the world. So let's take a look at his little bio there. He was also known as the Sea Dog. Well, I think because he was part pirate. Well, when he raided the ships, he sent the gold back to England, back to Queen Elizabeth. And guess what happened? Queen Elizabeth liked that, and she knighted him. He became known as Sir Francis Drake. Well, this infuriated the King of Spain because the King of Spain had all of this gold going back to his country. It was being stolen by the English, and the Queen said, yes, you can do that. So he sends the Spanish Armada. And that's kind of the reason. Elizabeth was never married. And back then, if you were never married, you were known as a virgin. And if you're a and that's why she was known as the Virgin Queen. That was kind of her nickname because she'd never been married. So he was the first Englishman to sail around the world in 1577 in his ship called the Golden Hind. That's just a little bit of a trivia question right there. Golden Hind. I don't know where they came up with the word Golden Hind. I don't know if they painted the back of their ship, gold. Okay, and then our first early settlements, and you actually saw this in the video, that she actually sent settlers to the New World. And the first one led by Sir Walter Raleigh. Now, Queen Elizabeth and Sir Walter Raleigh, they were. And she was quite fond of Sir Walter Raleigh. Well, he wanted to make his name known, other than just being knighted, as a sir. And so Sir Walter Raleigh led an expedition to North Carolina, and we call this the Roanoke Settlement. Now, Roanoke is an island in Virginia. See the Roanoke? This is an island just off the coast of Virginia. It's not on the land, it's the island. We actually have a lady that was pregnant on the ship. Her name was Elizabeth, and she gave birth to Virginia in America. Virginia Dare was the first English person born in America. Well, they began to run out of supplies. And so John White, who was the leader of the expedition, he sent some ships back to England to get supplies. And when he sent ships back to England to get supplies, they had to wait in port because guess what was happening in 1588? The Spanish Armada. And they could never leave Plymouth to go back. They could never bring supplies back. It was 3 years later that supplies finally came back. And when they get back and they pull into the island, they don't find anybody. In fact, that's the reason why we call this the lost colony of Roanoke. You see, because nobody's there. And they wonder, and they begin to speculate what happened. And so we're really not sure exactly what happened, but there's several theories. One of the theories is the fact that there was this Indian tribe on the mainland of Virginia, and they didn't like the settlers, so they went over and took them. But you know something? If the settlers did that, if the Indians did that to the settlers and took them back, some of them would have intermarried with the Indians, and we would see their descendants. But there's no gene pool of whites and Indians at that time mixing. So that wasn't it. Some people say that there was this enormous hurricane that came and wiped the people off. It could have happened. I mean, you get those swells, that could have happened. But there were no bones or no bodies ever dug up or found of anybody. No bones bleaching in the sand or anything. I mean, that didn't happen. There was, the word Croatoan was carved into a tree. Some people think that it was the name of the Indians. Some people think it was the name of the hurricane they named. And then some people think this, that at one particular evening, they saw this enormous light in the sky. And as it came over, and they all gathered around this light, and this light descended upon them, and then it took them up into this craft. Some people think they were abducted by aliens. Now that's actually what I believe. I believe they were all taken up. I mean, have you ever seen the light? They saw the light, and they went up. Someday they shall return to us. Someday.
Let's take a look at this video. Figure out what happened. And no one knows what really happened to 150 early American settlers who vanished into thin air. They were the settlers of the Roanoke colony, victims of the most mysterious mass disappearance.
1590. Supply ships arrived at Roanoke Island, a colony founded by Sir Walter Raleigh off the coast of what will become North Carolina. They were expecting to find a thriving settlement, but they find nothing. The colony and its inhabitants had mysteriously disappeared.
We've never found any trace of that colony. Not even a sliver of glass, anything. A shard of pottery, a piece of brick.
The British colony of Roanoke was established in 1587. Its 150 settlers, men, women, and children, had set about starting a community, building homes, tending crops, raising animals. Their governor, John White, soon sailed back to England for more supplies. He would be gone for 3 years. When White finally returned, he was greeted with the unimaginable.
It wasn't ruined. It wasn't washed away. It wasn't burned. It hadn't collapsed from disrepair. The settlement was gone. And around the site of the settlement was a fence that was not there when John White left in 1587. On that fence was carved a single word, Croatoan.
This mysterious word, ominously etched on the last remnant of the colony, was the name of a local Indian tribe and a nearby island. The only other sign that anybody had ever been there were the letters C-R-O carved into a tree, but nothing more. Every whisper of the settlers seemingly vanished from the face of the earth. White's search efforts were marred by poor weather, and he was forced to return home to England. But the mystery of Roanoke returned with him. Where did all those people go? A perplexing problem that has persisted for centuries.
Based on today's information, the problem is unsolvable.
Unsolvable, but for the curious, irresistible. The legendary lost colony of Roanoke has secured a place in history as the site of the most mysterious mass disappearance.
Okay, so we don't really know what happened to Roanoke. The colony did fail because any of the remaining settlers went back to England. You know, that came with John White. They went back to England. They said, we can't do this. So Roanoke is not the first permanent English settlement. The next one is. And this one here, we call this one here Jamestown. Jamestown became known as the first permanent English settlement in the New World. I actually flashing over a map right here, and you can actually see this. The Jamestown colony is right up here in the James River. Now, if you go up a little bit further north, you'll actually get the Chesapeake Bay area. And the Chesapeake Bay area, well, that's where Washington, D.C. is. So you've got the Jamestown colony right there, Washington, D.C. up here. And then here's where Virginia was, the lost colony of Roanoke. It was an island off the coast of North Carolina right here, and guess what? That colony didn't stick. But the Jamestown colony, well, this one's going to work. 1585 was Roanoke, 1607 was Jamestown. There were lots of problems. It didn't go very well. Most of the people that came over on the boat were men and boys. There were no women. And they came over searching for gold and silver and precious jewels. They really didn't come over with the idea of planting crops. They came over with the idea of looking for gold. So there were lots of problems from the start. And they're going to run out of supplies real quick. And when you don't run out of supplies and it starts to become winter and you can't forage for food, well, you're going to die. You're going to starve to death and die. And that's exactly what happened. At first, there was instituted this economic system called the common store system. And it's kind of a communal system where everybody can place all of his food into a common store where you could all come and draw from. Well, that was really cool, and that's a really, really good way to do it. That's kind of the way your refrigerator is at home. Your parents come in there, they stock it, and guess what? All family members can participate in the refrigerator whenever they want. Your refrigerator is a common store system. Now, sometimes you might go out to eat and bring home some leftovers. You might say, hey, this is mine. You might put your name on it. Don't eat. This is mine. But for the most part, your refrigerator is just like this common store system. You get to take from it and eat from it what you want. Well, guess what's going to happen real quick? When everybody's drawn out and nobody's working and planting crops and hunting deer and stuff like that, you're going to run out of food real quick. And so the common store system, well, it kind of doesn't work. You know, think of the neighborhood that you live in. Think of the apartment complex you live in. Think of where you live. And think about how if everybody on your block had to put all their food into one common refrigerator and everybody could come and take the food. And if those people weren't putting all their food back in there every single day, well, you'd run out of food real quick. And that's exactly what happened right here. Food is going to run out real quick and people are going to start starving. You know, we kind of call this common store system socialism, where the state provides for everything. Today it's called communism. The problem is that more people took out more than they put in supplies, were quickly depleted. And today we call this kind of government, we call this type of system socialism. So here's Captain John Smith. I got a picture of him right here. Captain John Smith, well, he instituted some changes. And basically, his changes saved the colony from starvation. Captain John Smith instituted this biblical principle that if you don't work, you don't eat. And the biblical principle was not working to find gold, because there is no gold in Virginia, but working to plant crops and forage for food, shooting game, bringing it back for the colony to eat. By 1610, there were only 60 of the 200 that remained. Everybody else had died or starved to death or disease or something. And they called this the Great Starving Time. It was said that young boys would boil their shoes to soften up the leather of their shoes and eat the leather. I don't know if you know, but you can eat cow skin. That's what leather is. Leather is cow skin. You can eat it because it's skin of an animal, okay? So if you boil it, soften it up and eat it, you're going to get some nutrition from it. By 1610, there were only 60 of the 200 remained. Just a couple of little facts here that you've probably seen before. Have you ever heard of Pocahontas? Sure you have. You actually saw the little Walt Disney cartoon of Pocahontas, right? Here she is right here. This is Pocahontas, Walt Disney, right there. Some people have pictured her and drawn her like that. But she was the one that married John Rolfe. Now everybody thinks, according to Walt Disney, the Disney movie, that she married Captain John Smith and fell in love with him. Well, actually she didn't. She helped John Smith, saved him from getting beheaded and getting murdered by the Indians, but she ends up marrying John Rolfe, who introduced tobacco as a cash crop. Because remember that these people, they can't make any money. They're not finding any gold. And they have to do something they can actually make some money with. The Indians taught them how to smoke tobacco. And so John Rolfe took the tobacco back to the king. By this time, it's the cousin of Elizabeth, who's now king. His name's James I. He actually ordered the Bible to the King James Version. That's the same king. And so he, took his first toke on a pipe, offered to him by John Rolfe. And he gave it to all of his court. And all of his court started smoking. And that's when smoking became popular. You see, tobacco is an Indian plant. It's a North American plant. And it doesn't get introduced into Europe until John Rolfe brought it over and introduced it to his king. The king passed it around to his court, and everybody starts smoking it. The colony itself was about to go under. I don't know how they made it. There were 3 events in 1619 that actually happened. And the first event that happened was that women are going to come over on a boat. I don't know if you can imagine what this was like. Let's just say that there's, by this time now there's 50 men left. And they've been kind of walking around with the fellas for the last 10 years, 1607, 1619. They're just walking, eking out a living, and suddenly off on the horizon they see this boat, and they know that women are on the boat. I mean, right away, men are going to start going, oh, I got to go take a bath. I got to cut my hair. I got to trim my beard. I got to brush my teeth. Why? I mean, we don't do it for the fellas. We would never do that for the guys. But when you got girls in your midst, suddenly, well, I got to get straightened up here. How's my hair? How do I look? You see, women make men responsible. You see, without women, men just kind of wallow around wondering what they were supposed to do. But women seem to get men on the right track. I'm serious about this. You think I'm kidding. I'm not. And that's why I put down right here that women make men responsible. They suddenly now, instead of just working for the common store system, now they got to build a home. Well, because I got me a woman. And we're going to have kids pretty soon. I got to have a place for her. She's not going to live in the common dorm where all the fellas sleep. Oh, we got to have our own space. And so you're becoming more and more responsible. I got to provide. I got to go hunting. I got to plant some crops because I got to provide for my family. Women make men responsible, and that's the reason. Second thing that happened in 1619 was the fact that Dutch slave traders brought slaves to the New World for the first time. This is not a good thing. I wish this was different. I wish this part of United States history was different. I wish Jamestown would have said, you know, women, come on. But slaves, you know, that's an evil institution. We're not going to have it in the New World. But they didn't. This is going to be part of America. And we're going to talk about it over and over again about how this really did not help American society to have slavery. But Dutch slave traders, they brought slaves. They sold them to the white English right there. We've got that. And then finally, the last one right here, the House of Burgess. The House of Burgess was the first representative assembly or legislature in the New World. And so this is important. You know why? This is important because, well, this is the first time we get representative government in the New World. So 1619 women, slaves, and the House of Burgess come to the New World. And that's why we call that the representative assembly.
On December the 20th, 1606, 3 ships left London for the New World. On board were some 140 Englishmen, sailing into the unknown. When they finally sighted land, they were moved by what they saw.
Heaven and earth never better framed a place for man's habitation.
The English ships were heading for Chesapeake Bay, on the east coast of North America, where a strip of land had been granted to the Virginia Company of London. In 1607, the forests of Virginia were home to the Algonquian Indians, who were united under the powerful leadership of one great chief, Powhatan. His territory stretched over a vast area of Virginia and included more than 30 Indian tribes. The English explored the Chesapeake Bay and chose an island 50 miles up the James River. Here they built a settlement and named it Jamestown, after their king, James I. Although the settlement was funded by private investment, it would have to pay its own way. The instructions from London were to find gold and any other goods that would make a profit in England. The settlers built a temporary trading post, which they fortified against both the Spanish and the Indians. But to succeed, the company had to attract more men to the settlement. Soon the supply ships were returning to England with stories of how the rivers of Virginia were teeming with wildlife. The Indians anxiously watched the settlers' every move. It looked to them as though the white men planned to stay. The Algonquin lived in harmony with nature. A self-sufficient and proud people, they grew their own food and tobacco, fished in the rivers, and hunted in the forests. Their lives centered around their families. Chief Powhatan had fathered 100 children, but one was his favorite. She was named Pocahontas, the playful one. Pocahontas often sat at her father's side by the fire. Here she heard the news that white men had arrived in her father's territory. It was not long before the English realized that the site they had chosen to settle was marshy, swarming with deadly mosquitoes. By the summer of 1607, they found their food supplies dwindling. A Eventually, the settlers were forced to leave the safety of their fort to find food. But hunting was difficult in this strange terrain, and they risked being attacked by the Indians. As deadly and quiet as were the Indian bows, they were no match for the modern rifles brought over from England. By the end of the summer, 50 men, almost half the colony, had died of malaria or starvation. Most of the remaining colonists were the second sons of aristocrats, without land to inherit. Few had any practical skills. John Smith was an exception. An experienced soldier and able diplomat, he emerged as their natural leader. Smith seemed to know best how to handle the Indians and advised that a strong hand should be taken. The shortage of food forced him to make trading trips into uncharted Indian territory to find supplies that would help the colony to survive. He learned to speak their language and told them that the English had come temporarily to escape the Spanish and to trade, not to colonize. But the Indians grew increasingly suspicious of the white men. Six months after the English had arrived, Powhatan's half-brother encountered Smith on the Chickahominy River. Smith was taken prisoner and proudly shown off by the Indians as a living trophy. He was paraded from village to village by canoe and put on display while the Indians danced before their fires. Finally, after several weeks, Smith was brought before Powhatan. Beside the chief sat his wives and children, including his beloved Pocahontas. Smith described a strange and terrifying ritual. To the sound of drums and chanting, he was forced to lay his head on two great stones. Because she was Powhatan's favorite daughter, her intervention saved his life. Smith was made an honorary member of the tribe and was allowed to return to Jamestown. Pocahontas often visited the Jamestown fort and amused Smith and the other colonists with her childish pranks.